Good morning, my beautiful babes and babettes. I'm your resident active advocate, and it's snowing outside! Secretly, I'm still 5 years old on the inside when it comes to the first major snow of the year, even though I don't like the cold or the snow. And today, I would like to address mobility disability in the media, specifically the portrayal of wheelchairs, because wheelchair users, I mean, you often see them getting quite a bit of brunt of the quote joke from the media, but wheelchairs at the same time can also be a really interesting and cool assisted device to portray in the media, because you can go a lot faster on wheels than you can on your feet, no matter how fast you can run. I don't know whether you could outrun a wheelchair if the person using it is very fast with their arms, or if they are using an electric wheelchair. Side effect of using an electric wheelchair, though, is that sometimes they can break down. And I actually recently spoke to a man who said that his wheelchair broke down in the middle of the road. And I'm not entirely sure how he resolved this, but I'm pretty sure he had to get someone to help him get across the street because it wasn't running for him. And like he could have gotten hit by a car, like, very easily, because it's like, what are you going to do when your wheelchair breaks down? So, as I have previously stated in this series, a person's assisted devices are considered by the disability communities, plural, to be part of that person's body. So, with the wheelchair user, the wheelchair is substituting for the function of their legs. So, ostensibly, your wheels are your feet, or your wheels are your legs. It is not considered kosher to touch a person's assisted device without their permission, in the same way that it is not considered kosher to touch a person's guide dog or, service animal without their permission, especially when they're on harness. When it comes to the portrayal of wheelchairs in the media, I'm going to take the example of Family Guy, and I've brought this series into my series before because at least Seth MacFarlane is an equal opportunist. He makes fun of everyone equally, pretty much. But on Family Guy, you have the character of Joe Swanson, who had some kind of accident and after the fact was a wheelchair user. Now, with Joe, you can see that his upper half is very, very powerfully built, because that would actually be true to real life as well. If you did not use an electric wheelchair, your arms would get very strong because you're having to wheel yourself everywhere. But with Joe, he considers the use of the wheelchair to be dehumanizing to some degree, and it's often portrayed as like his wife having to help him do pretty much everything. And, it's like the infantilization of people who use wheelchairs. They are portrayed as not having an active sex life. They're portrayed as incapable of helping themselves with even the most basic functions. And that is not accurate. That is not even, you can't get along in that light in terms of actually understanding the person with the disability if you automatically assume that A, they are helpless, B, they are sexless, because to do so is to infantilize. And making a child out of a person with a disability is not going to do you any favors. It's not going to do them any favors, because yet again, there's that dynamic of inequality, because children are often seen in our society to be in need of, guidance, in need of the aid of the real adults in the room. Well, if the wheelchair user is also a real adult in the room, what does it say of our society that we would go so far to infantilize them and to age them down, to make a child of them? I don't think that speaks very well to our dynamic for wheelchair users. So, on the other hand, though, like I say, you can go a lot faster in a wheelchair than you can on foot. So when it comes to Joe Swanson actually being on the job, he's often quite capable of catching the runaway because he can, speed along the street a lot faster than his companions on their feet can. So that's where his functionality definitely comes into play. No one on this earth is, quote, without a use. I don't believe that. We are all good for something. We all have nascent talents. We all have gifts. And as I mentioned yesterday with the whole deafness in the media perspective, one can use their disability to their advantage. As I said with Grandpa Simpson, he can turn off his hearing aid so he doesn't have to listen to Homer, blah, 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 blah. With Joe, he can use his wheels to outrun even the fastest person on foot. And it's very functional if you look at it from that perspective. It's just that this whole dichotomy is created of where am I useful versus where am I useless. And I don't believe in the whole uselessness thing. Like, he's not able to pleasure his wife, he's not able to play with his child, that sort of thing. That's not how this works. Not in real life. Like I say, I do appreciate the fact that McFarlane is an equal opportunist, but at the same time, as I said, media informs our opinions, and our opinions inform media. This is a symbiotic relationship. In order to correct the one, you have to correct the other. But I think that in our case, because we are so submerged in media, it has to start with correcting the media, because we're not going to look for a new perspective in a thing that we are not able to perceive. In other words, if we don't have the media incentive, the outside incentive to change our view, we're not going to do so. I think it begins with that, but it also begins with the incentive to want to change the media itself. So again, the symbiosis. This up here in your mind has to change first before anything else can be changed. And I'm not saying that everyone just naturally has these prejudices and these negative views of people with disabilities. That isn't true either. I am not under the compulsion to make sweeping statements about anyone, anything. That is all on an individual level, on an individual basis. So that will be my video about mobility disability in the media. I mean, there are other portrayals, definitely, but usually when it comes to, say, using a walker, that is more of a thing that is portrayed for the elderly in the media rather than strictly for people with a mobility disability. It's more of an age-related thing than it is, say, an accident-related thing or a birth defect-related thing. There's that, and then not very often anymore do you see portrayals of people using a cane to get around or a crutch to get around. That was more back in, you've all seen A Christmas Carol with Tiny Tim using his crutch, right? As I have said in previous videos in this series, it is most likely that he had had polio as a very, very young child, like younger than he was. And that would have, injured or broken down part of his body so that he would have had to use a crutch. Much more common back in Dickens' time than in our time. Now we have the polio vaccine, thankfully. And when my mother was a child, it was not an option to get the vaccine or not to get the vaccine. Her father packed them all into the car, took them to the hospital or to the doctor. Every single one of his children, my mother and her siblings, got the polio vaccine. because my grandfather, peace be upon him, knew exactly what would happen to you, or what could happen to you, if you didn't get vaccinated. I am not anti-vax, I'm sure you can tell, but I don't want to get overly political if I can help it, at least not right now. We'll start talking about that when the COVID vaccine comes out. Ooh, that's going to be a fun one. All right, so that is my video on mobility disability in the media. And just remember, there's always nuance. Look for the nuance. Look at what you are looking at consciously. View things consciously. Don't just passively interact with these things or have them interact with you. All right, thank you very much. I will see you tomorrow for... Actually, I think I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit because I want to talk about a point that is rather important, which I have yet to address. So I'll be doing that tomorrow. All right, farewell. If it is snowing where you are, enjoy the snow or stay out of the snow, depending on your preference. Mwah!